We are all, of course, witnesses to history, but some of us stand much closer to it than others, and as such, it leaves a deeper impression. Tracey Deer is an accomplished writer, producer, and director who has worked on television shows such as Anne with an E and Mohawk Girls. And now she has her first feature film. It's called Beans. Set during the so-called Oka Crisis in the summer of 1990, it's been called the best coming-of-age film of the year and won several awards, including, just last month, Canadian Screen Awards for Best First Feature Film and Best Motion Picture. And it brings Tracey Deer to our virtual studio tonight from Montreal, Quebec. Tracey, so great to have you here. I gotta tell you, I love this movie, but boy, you do not spare a thing. Let's just show a little clip of this and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, if you would, let's go.
My name is Digahandekwa. Or you can call me Beans. Everybody does.
This is our road! Our road!
If you can't feel pain, no one can hurt you.
Beans is the nickname of the protagonist in the film. We should just say off the top here. And Tracey, there are moments when I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, did this really happen? I sure hope this did not happen, because this is really too much. So let's start there. How much of this film was autobiographical?
So the emotional through line of the film is very much representative of my coming of age story. In terms of all of the big historical events, the recreations that you see in the film, these are all moments that did happen. I personally wasn't at all of them. I put my character there in order to tell this story, but I was at some of them. And so some of these scenes in the film are ripped directly from my memory, and I endeavored to recreate them exactly as I experienced them. So it's a combination. It's a combination of things I actually experienced myself, historical moments that actually happened, and some moments created to represent the emotional moments that I went through in my coming of age.
Yeah, I get you. I guess you would have been a kid of about 12 years old when the Oka Crisis happened. So I'm wondering how influential all of that was in your, I guess, eventual decision down the road to become a filmmaker.
So it was very influential in the filmmaker I have become. I will say that. That summer really shattered my sense of safety, my sense of self-worth, and it led me down a very, very dark path, a very hopeless path for much of my adolescence. And it was the resiliency and the strength of my people that I'm so grateful for, because I was able to climb out of that darkness, and the Oka Crisis and what I experienced there is really now my fuel in all the work that I do and in all the bridge building I seek to do with the stories I tell. I never want something like that to happen again, and I never want another Indigenous child to have that kind of coming of age. In terms of it inspiring me to become a filmmaker, I was already on that path. I had started watching movies at home. I was just enthralled with these different worlds and the safe space to feel my emotions. So I was 12 years old when I was hit by the thunderbolt to become a filmmaker, and I was also 12 years old when I went through this really devastating moment, and it began this journey of figuring out who I am as an Indigenous person and what that means to be an Indigenous person in this country.
How old is the young girl that you cast to play Beans?
In the film, the actress Gawandia was 13 years old when we filmed this.
How did you find her? She was amazing.
I know. She is incredible. She is a star. So we did an open casting call across the country to find all of the young talent for the film. We had kids from across the country send in videos from their kitchens and from their living rooms, which we are now quite used to living in this pandemic and with Zoom. But back then, it was a new thing for them to film themselves in their wherever they're comfortable and send it to us. We ended up coming up with a short list for each role, and we flew the kids and their families into Toronto for a 2-day acting workshop where they got to learn more about what it is to be an actor, how to access your emotions, and I was there for the entire thing. We didn't do any scenes from Beans. It was really there. It was really a fun time for the kids to learn about acting and to spend time with each other. And after that, we did another audition process. They were all there, and I was able to pair them up in sibling pairs and see what kind of chemistry they had. And it was after that that we found 3 of our lead roles. And then the last role of Ruby, the youngest character, I discovered her a little bit later, and she comes from my community of Ganawage.
How do you have a conversation with a 13-year-old girl or younger, in the case of Ruby, and say, look, for the next several weeks of your life, we're going to put you in circumstances where we're going to scare the crap out of you, essentially. And with the lead character as well, with Beans, we're going to put you in some sexually provocative and very difficult circumstances for the purposes of telling this story. How does that conversation go?
Well, the conversation isn't that. The conversation is, here's the script and here's the story, and here's how I want to film it. So on the page and on the screen, it is very scary and very ugly and very traumatic. There are many scenes that are very traumatic, but we set out in telling this story. We set out with the goal of not causing trauma and also having as much fun as possible. I believe, especially when there are kids involved, kids should not be working. They're children. So for them to come on board and do this with me, they needed to be having fun. They needed to be enjoying themselves.
Tracey, so many of these scenes did not look fun, I got to tell you.
I know. And that is the magic of movie making. When it was all pieced together, you see what it is. But on the day, there were many different things we did to protect the kids and keep the energy on set very positive and very stress-free. And I know it's hard to imagine once you see the actual film. But for instance, a lot of the scenes where there are some very difficult subject matter going on, our shooting plan actually has the kids very much removed from a lot of it. So the kids use their imagination. I give them an overview of like what's going on around them. And in the shots where you see them crying or screaming, running, scared, that is all of their imagination. So the kids never saw the other side of it until they saw the final cut of the film. And that, I think that's a real testament to their talent, because you do feel that they are in the midst of all of that and they are reacting directly to those stresses. But in fact, for many of it, they are surrounded by a very supportive team. Of course, their family is there, and all of these kids became very, very close. And they had a really good time. In between certain takes, there were massive giggle fests going on. Gawandio, who would go from a scene that I find just so heart-wrenching, in the motel, she has an emotional breakdown in that bathroom. And she went to this performance place that is extraordinary. And then as soon as we yelled cut, and I have tears streaming down my face because the performance is reaching me, she looked to me with a big smile on her face and said, "How was that?" And I just told her that was the most incredible thing. Let's go and check to see how your father's doing. And we left the bathroom, and this incredible young woman is skipping down the hall. You know, she knows what she just accomplished. And she comes into the next room to see her father, to see her friends, and her friends, the other actors are all there, and they're all giving her so many like, "Wow, I can't believe you did that." And her father is stricken. I'm stricken. But she was having a wonderful time and filled with pride at what she was doing. And I think that's what makes a great actor, is there's the role and then there's who you are. And that was very much encouraged on the set, is when you are not in the role, you come back to yourself, and that is an entirely different emotional space to be in.
Well, it's very well directed and extremely well edited then, because I'll tell you, you certainly convey the impression that these kids are in the midst of this world coming in on them. And, well, let me follow up with this. What percentage of the cast and crew would you say on your picture were of Indigenous background?
So, of course, all of the Indigenous roles in the film were played by Indigenous people. They were not all Mohawk. They represented nations from across the country. In regards to our crew, you know, I absolutely always do seek to hire as many Indigenous people as possible. And over the years, working out here with Mohawk girls, I've developed wonderful relationships with a number of crew. So I certainly cannot say it's a giant percentage, unfortunately, but our hair and makeup team were all Indigenous. Who else?
Well, I asked the question for this reason, because I assume with a significant percentage of indigeneity on the set and in the post-production and so on, that that you as the filmmaker have to take into account being careful not to re-traumatize people who may have this story as a very significant part of their past. How do you do that?
Yes. So how we did that, it was very, very important to me. Again, all of our Mohawk extras in the film, many of them were survivors of this summer. And a big first piece of that is informed consent. So everyone knew exactly what they were getting into. Oftentimes when you're hiring extras, they don't know what they're coming to do. You're booked for a time, you're booked for a place, and you show up, and sometimes that's really fun. You find out you're going to be a fireman. You find out you're going to be at a mall. And I did not want anyone showing up to discover they were going to be reliving a traumatic event. I also felt the same way about all of our non-Indigenous extras. I didn't want anyone coming to set and being surprised and uncomfortable that they had to play a racist. So there was informed consent across the board. So everyone that did come wanted to be there, and they had their own reasons for wanting to come and be a part of it. We also had 3 Indigenous social workers there on our most traumatic day when we recreated the mob throwing stones at the women, children, and elderly. We had a PTSD specialist there, and these support workers were there for everybody. We didn't film any of these traumatic recreations within the communities that they took place. So we found locations a good 40 to 45 minutes outside of the communities this took place in, because it was not about, you know, opening wounds at all. We've come a long way as communities over the 30 years to repair all of that. So we found communities outside that were, again, also very welcome. They knew exactly what we were coming to do. There was no sneakiness. Everyone knew what we were coming to do, and they welcomed us. They wanted to be a part of telling the story, making sure the story got out there. I'm trying to think of what else we did.
Well, that's a pretty good list right there.
Thank you.
This did take place 30 years ago, and I remember it well. This, of course, a dispute over a developer who wanted to build a golf course on what was ancestral burial land for Indigenous communities in Oka, Quebec. And it's 31 years ago. But how much of the feeling of this story do you think is still very present day?
It is entirely current. So the film is a period piece, 31 years ago, as you said, but the themes are all still playing out across this country. The damage that was done to me as a little girl is still being done to our children across the country. So even though it is a period piece, it is still, it's a current story with a very vital message that things do need to change right now, so that this is no longer the coming of age story of our children, because it is devastating and it destroys hope. And it just has to stop. I'm tired of it being an unsafe place for Indigenous people. It just really does have to stop.
All right, having said that, you were on a program in 2008 talking about your documentary at the time, Club Native, which is set on a Mohawk reserve in Kahnawake in Quebec. And what emerges from that conversation is that there are two unspoken rules. Don't marry a white person and don't have a child with a white person. Now that's 2008. Has there been a shift in thinking since then, in your view?
So the answer is complicated. I think that there is a younger generation coming up thinking about preservation of culture in a different way. But there's definitely still a generation that believes in that blood quantum mentality. And that mentality is often passed through family. So it's still a very complicated and controversial issue back home, and I think in communities across the country.
Well, okay, how personal can I get with you here?
I don't know. How personal do you want to go?
Well, who are you married to?
I'm married to a Quebecois man. His name is Sylvain, and he's wonderful.
Is he Indigenous?
He is not. He's Quebecois.
And is that a problem for some in your community?
Yes, I think it is a problem for some people in my community. I do have the support of my family, and I do have the support of some people as well. And I have the love of an incredible man in my life. I have a wonderful family. I have support. I have safety. And that's what really matters to me.
You know, when you watch your movie, you could come away from that film thinking, I cannot imagine the Francophone community of Quebec and the Indigenous community located in Quebec ever getting together on anything. There's just way too much enmity and hostility there. And yet I guess you are an example that that's not true. Do you think of yourself that way?
I do think we represent how bridges can be built, and I do think that love is the way that we build those bridges. What was really interesting when I first met Sylvain and we first started dating, and we got into how strongly we feel about our cultures. I did have all of those past messages in my head of how would this ever work? And we very quickly came to realize that he feels just as passionate about his culture as I feel about mine. And that doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And there was great understanding that was reached when I realized we're actually more alike than we are different. And he wants to celebrate and live in his culture and not impede on others. And that is exactly the way what we want as well. And so very quickly, I felt understood, he felt respected, and that bridge was built a lot quicker than I thought.
That's encouraging. Did he have any trouble in his Francophone community trying to justify his marriage to you?
Not that I'm aware. No, his family has been very welcoming, very curious, very interested, lots of questions. I think that has gone smoothly.
Well, that's very hopeful. Let me read back a quote of yours that you gave in an interview last month, and it goes like this. I grew up, you say, feeling very invisible and very voiceless and very unimportant. And now I have this platform. It's very overwhelming, it's very exciting, it's very fulfilling. It's also difficult because there's so many that don't get to have their dreams come true. I don't want to be one of the few, I want to be one of the many. Okay, so where are we with Indigenous filmmaking today? Are you one of the few or are you one of the many?
So I remember that quote, and I was crying in that interview. So you picked a good quote because it just brought me right back. I think there are definitely many of us, but many of us are still struggling to be heard and to be supported as storytellers. I do think we are in an extraordinary moment right now, and those doors are opening, which is fantastic. I do think that there needs to be a much bigger platform. We need more support. So I do feel right now one of few, because we need way more. We need much more representation, not only in this business, in this industry, but across the country, in all industries. So I do think that statement, I said it a month ago. I do think it's valid and current, but that is in no way to dismiss all of my incredible colleagues who are all out there doing the same. I think we are all one of few, and we just want to keep building our community of storytellers and giving them the platform that they deserve.
I think it's fair to say that one thing that the discovery of the 215 did, and I would add your film to this as well, once it gets into theaters, once the movies get open, the cinemas get open, and we can actually go to the cinema and watch your movie, there's a potential right now for some kind of reckoning or new understanding that heretofore has escaped a lot of people in this country. And I guess I'm just curious as to what you think your film can do to contribute to what could be, a really important historic moment for this place.
I really hope that for the film. I've been thinking about this a lot. It took a very long time to make. It took a very long time to write and figure out this story, to revisit those memories. But I think it was all necessary to be out in this moment. I think if the film came out a few years ago, I don't know if the country would have been ready to go on that journey and take in the messages of the film and hopefully open their hearts. So it all played out the way it needed to come out now. And I really do hope that people leave the film loving Beans and her family and wanting to go out into the world to do what they can to make things better. Society is the problem, and that is not on Indigenous people to fix. We are doing all of the work that we can do on our end, but society, the problems of society, that is up to Canadians to address. And so I hope that the film is a call to action. I hope that they leave wanting to be our allies and wanting to do what they can to make things better.
National Indigenous Peoples Day. What does that mean to you?
Well, I like to celebrate being an Indigenous person and celebrate all of the incredible beauty and strength and resilience of my people every day. But I do love that the country has put a focus and given us this day to celebrate all that we are. But I don't want us to just have one day. I do want us to be in the minds of Canadians every day, because it's been way too long that we haven't been in anyone's mind for far too long. So it's wonderful. I will be proud and I will celebrate, and I will continue to do that every single day thereafter.
Hear, hear. I can't wait for the theaters to get open again so your movie can play and people can see it. And we're really grateful that you spent so much time with us here on TVO tonight talking about Beans, which is just a terrific picture and will really, never mind put you back in the time, but it'll give you so much to think about today as well. Thanks, Tracey. Great to be with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.